She was standing in the third row, wearing a blush pink dress, hair done perfectly, holding a glass of champagne, smiling at me like she was the happiest person in that entire room. And I smiled back, because she was my best friend, or at least, that is what I believed with my whole heart on that day. That is what I had believed for 11 years, through high school, through college, through every heartbreak and every celebration and every 2 a.m. phone call when life felt too heavy to carry alone. She was my person. She was also the maid of honor at my wedding, and 24 hours after she stood beside me at the altar, after she gave a toast that made the entire room cry, after she hugged me and whispered, "You deserve every bit of this happiness," she did something that I could not have imagined in my darkest nightmare. She sent my husband a message, and that message destroyed everything I thought my life was. But here is what she forgot, what people like her always forget. God had been watching every single moment, every smile, every lie, every calculated move she made while wearing the face of my best friend, and what he had planned for her, I could never have engineered myself. Let me tell you who she was to me, because you need to understand the depth of this betrayal before you can understand the magnitude of what came after. I met her when I was 15 years old. First day of 10th grade. I had just moved to a new school, new city, and I knew absolutely nobody. I remember sitting alone at lunch, staring at my food, trying very hard not to look as lost as I felt, and she sat down across from me, just like that. No introduction from anyone. No mutual friend. She just picked up her tray, walked over, sat down, and said, "You look like you need a friend and I happen to be an excellent one." I laughed. She laughed. And that was it. From that day forward, we were inseparable. She was at my 16th birthday. I was at hers. She held my hand when my parents went through their divorce and I felt like my whole world was splitting in half. I stayed with her for a week when her grandmother passed away and she could not stop crying long enough to eat. We went to the same college. Shared an apartment junior year. She was the first person I called when I got my dream job. I was the first person she called when her long-term boyfriend cheated on her, and I drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to sit with her because that is what you do for your person. When I met my husband, she was the first friend I introduced him to. When he proposed, she screamed louder than I did. When I asked her to be my maid of honor, she cried, actual tears, and said she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. I trusted her with everything, my fears, my insecurities, my marriage struggles during the engagement, the things my husband and I were working through privately, the doubts that every person has when they are about to make the biggest commitment of their life. I told her all of it, because that is what best friends are for. I did not know she was collecting every word like ammunition. The wedding was on a Saturday. It was everything I had dreamed of. Small, intimate, exactly the way I had always wanted. 50 people who genuinely loved us. String lights over an outdoor venue. My husband looking at me at the altar like I was the only thing in the room worth looking at. She stood right beside me through all of it. Her speech at the reception was extraordinary. She talked about the day we met at that lunch table. She talked about all the years of friendship. She talked about my husband and how she had watched him become exactly the kind of man I deserved. She said, "I have never seen my best friend this happy, and knowing she gets to keep this happiness for the rest of her life is the greatest gift I have ever been given." People were wiping their eyes all over that room. My husband squeezed my hand under the table. She raised her glass and everyone toasted to us. And then she hugged me, long and tight, and whispered those words, "You deserve every bit of this happiness." I believed her. How could I not believe her? The next morning, a Sunday, my husband and I were supposed to sleep in. We were leaving for our honeymoon on Monday. One perfect, quiet day between the wedding and the trip. That was the plan. I woke up first, made coffee, sat on the balcony of our hotel suite watching the morning come in. I was so full of peace that I remember thinking, this is what it feels like when life is exactly right. My husband woke up about an hour later. He came out to the balcony. He had his phone in his hand. I noticed immediately that something was wrong. His face was pale. Not sick pale. Stunned pale. The kind of pale that happens when your brain receives information it does not know how to process. I said, "What's wrong?" He looked at me for a long moment and then he handed me his phone. There was a message. Sent at 2:17 in the morning. From her. I am not going to share every word of that message. Some things are too private even now. But I will tell you what it was. It was a confession. She told him that she had been in love with him since the first time I introduced them. She told him that watching us get married had broken something inside her and she could not stay quiet anymore. She told him things about me, private things I had shared with her in confidence, vulnerabilities I had trusted only her with, twisted and reformed to make me sound unstable, difficult, someone he should reconsider. She told him that she would be there for him if he ever realized he had made a mistake. She sent this message 11 hours after our wedding ceremony. 11 hours. While I was sleeping. While I was dreaming about our honeymoon. While I was at the most trusting, most open, most hopeful moment of my entire life. She was awake at 2 a.m., typing that message. I sat there on that balcony, coffee going cold in my hand, reading her words, and I felt something I have never felt before and hope to never feel again. It was not just heartbreak. It was not just anger. It was something deeper and more disorienting than both of those things. It was the feeling of a reality you believed in completely, suddenly revealed to be something else entirely, like standing on ground you trusted completely and feeling it shift beneath your feet. 11 years. 11 years of what I thought was friendship, and it had been something else all along. My husband sat with me on that balcony for a long time. He did not try to fix it or minimize it or tell me how to feel. He just sat with me. Which was, I think, exactly right. When I finally spoke, I said just one thing. I need you to tell me the truth. Has anything ever happened between you and her? He looked me in the eyes and he said, never. Not even close. She made me uncomfortable the few times she got too familiar, and I never told you because I did not want to cause problems between you and your best friend. I am sorry I did not say something sooner. I believed him. I still believe him. Not blindly, but because everything in the years we had been together pointed toward a man who was honest with me even when honesty was hard. And then he said something that I hold on to even now. He said, she did not destroy our marriage. She tried to. But she failed. And the only question now is what you want to do. I thought about that for a very long time, and then I picked up my phone. I did not call her. I did not text her. I opened her message thread, 11 years of conversations, thousands of messages, and I read some of them. The birthday messages. The I love you like a sister messages. The you are my favorite human on this planet messages. And then I scrolled to the very first message she had ever sent me, 15 years old, after that first lunch. It said, today was the best first day of school I've ever had. Thank you for being easy to be friends with. I put my phone down, and I made a decision that I have never regretted. I blocked her on everything. Every platform. Every number. I did not send a response. I did not give her an explanation. I did not offer her the dramatic confrontation she had likely anticipated. I simply removed her from my life as completely and quietly as she had tried to remove my happiness. And then my husband and I went on our honeymoon. I want to talk about what came after. Because the wound did not close immediately. It took time. Real time. The first few weeks back from the honeymoon were hard in a way I had not expected. Not because of my marriage. My husband was steadfast and patient and present in all the ways I needed. But because of grief. And I want to be honest about this because I think people underestimate the grief that comes with losing a friendship. We talk a lot about romantic heartbreak. We have songs and movies and entire industries built around that kind of loss. But the loss of a deep, long friendship, especially one that turns out to have been built on something false. That grief is its own particular kind of devastating. I grieved the lunches, the phone calls, the person I called first with good news and bad news. I grieved the future I had imagined, her kids and my kids growing up together, growing old as friends, being the kind of women who had known each other their whole lives and had the photographs to prove it. I grieved all of that, and then, slowly, I also got angry. Not a hot, explosive anger. A cold, clear anger. The kind that comes when grief finishes its first wave and leaves behind it a very sharp understanding of what actually happened. She had used me, not just at the end. Looking back with new eyes, I began to see patterns I had explained away for years. The subtle put-downs disguised as jokes, the times she had inserted herself into situations with my husband in ways I had written off as her just being friendly, the way she always seemed to resurface whenever my relationship was at a difficult point, always with an ear to listen, always asking questions that felt caring but now read differently. She had not been my best friend for 11 years. She had been playing a character, and I had given that character everything. My secrets, my trust, my most private struggles. My wedding day, the anger was useful. Not as a place to live, but as fuel to do what needed to be done next. I decided to heal out loud, not on social media, not in a public, performative way, but in real life, with real people. I decided not to be ashamed of what had happened, because my first instinct was shame. Isn't that strange? She had betrayed me, and my first instinct was to feel embarrassed. To not want people to know, to wonder what it said about my judgment that I had trusted someone so completely who turned out to be so dishonest. I had to fight that instinct hard. I started by telling my mother, then my sister, then a small circle of friends who I knew were genuinely mine, and every single person said a version of the same thing. They said, "We saw things we did not know how to tell you. We did not want to be the ones who came between you and someone you loved so much." That was its own kind of painful to hear, but it was also clarifying, because it meant the problem had never been my perception. It had been my trust. And trust, extended to the wrong person, is not a character flaw. It is evidence of an open heart. An open heart is not something to be ashamed of. I went back to therapy. I had done therapy before in my life, briefly, and I went back now because I knew this was something I needed help carrying. My therapist said something in our second session that I wrote down and kept. She said, "The most dangerous betrayals are the ones dressed in love, because they do not just break your heart. They make you question your own ability to see clearly." Healing from this means learning to trust yourself again, not just other people. Learning to trust myself again, that became the work. Now I need to tell you what happened to her, because this is the part of the story where I have to be very careful. Not because I want to protect her, but because I want to tell this part the right way. I did not do anything to her. I want to be clear about that. I did not make calls. I did not send messages to her family or her workplace. I did not run a campaign. I simply removed her from my life and focused entirely on my own. But here is what happens when you build your life on dishonesty. It collapses. Not always immediately. Sometimes it takes time. But it collapses. About 3 months after the wedding, I started hearing things through people we had both known. I was not seeking this information out. It came to me, the way things do in connected circles. She had told people a version of events. A version in which she was the wounded party. In which I had somehow wronged her, pushed her out, been a bad friend. She was, apparently, working very hard to get ahead of the narrative. But here is the problem with lying to cover a lie. You have to keep lying. And the more you lie, the more threads there are to pull. People who had been at her wedding, people who had heard her speech, people who had watched her hug me and toast to my happiness, began to ask questions. Her story did not hold up. The timeline did not make sense, and when people pressed her, she told different versions to different people. Within a few months, the social circle we had shared for years had quietly, organically, largely distanced themselves from her. Not because I asked them to. I never asked anyone to take sides, but because dishonesty, when it is exposed, has a smell that people recognize. She lost the community she had been part of for a decade, the job situation I heard about later. She had been navigating a workplace environment where her reputation had preceded her in ways she had not anticipated. Someone she had treated poorly years before was now in a position of authority. Old patterns had resurfaced in professional spaces. She was let go, and the relationship she had been in, a man she had started seeing around the time of my wedding, someone she had spoken about to mutual friends as a fresh start, ended badly. I do not know all the details and I do not need to. What I know is this: 1 year after she stood in that room and smiled at my wedding and made a toast about how much she loved me, she had lost her community, her job, and her relationship. She had stood at my wedding with a plan, and God had a different one. I am not going to tell you I felt nothing when I heard these things. I am going to be honest with you, the way I wish someone had been honest with me when I was younger and thought that the right response to someone else's downfall was either gleeful satisfaction or performed indifference. I felt something complicated. There was a moment of something that resembled relief. Because when you have been told you were crazy, when someone has tried to rewrite the story and make you the villain, having the truth surface is a kind of exhale. But there was also sadness, real sadness. Because somewhere underneath all of this was a 15-year-old girl who had sat down across from me at a lunch table and made me feel less alone on a hard day. And I do not know what happened to that girl, or when, or why she became someone capable of what she did. But the loss of who she could have been still sits with me sometimes in a quiet way. I do not wish her suffering. I genuinely mean that. What I wish for her is that she finds the kind of help that might allow her to become someone who does not need to tear other people down. Someone who can be happy for others without it feeling like a threat. I pray for that, and then I return to my own life, because my own life has become something beautiful. My marriage is strong, stronger, I think, than it would have been without this. Not because I am grateful for the betrayal, I am not, but because what we went through in those first days after the wedding, the way my husband handled it, the conversations we had, the honesty we chose, it built something between us that is harder to shake than the foundation of couples who have never been tested. We know what we are made of now. That knowledge is not nothing. I have built new friendships. Slower this time. More intentional. I have learned the difference between people who are drawn to you and people who are drawn to what you have. I have learned to watch for consistency, for whether someone's actions over time match their words, for whether they are genuinely happy when good things happen to you. I have a small circle now. Smaller than before. And it is worth more to me than the large one ever was. My career has grown in ways I did not anticipate. When I stopped pouring so much energy into managing that friendship, into being what she needed, into the subtle emotional labor that I now realize I had always performed around her, I had more of myself left over. For my work. For my actual life. It turns out I had been spending a great deal of energy on someone who was not spending any on me. Reclaiming that energy changed things. I am talking to you now. Directly. If you clicked on this video, something in this title resonated with you. And I do not think that is an accident. Maybe you have a person in your life right now who smiles at you the way she smiled at me. Someone who says all the right things in public and does something different in private. Someone whose support has always felt slightly off, slightly conditional, slightly like it comes with a cost you cannot quite name. Trust that feeling. I ignored that feeling for years. Not because I was foolish, but because I loved her, and love has a way of explaining away the things that do not quite fit. But your instincts exist for a reason. They are not paranoia. They are pattern recognition. And when something in you keeps whispering that something is not right, that whisper deserves to be heard. I also want to say something to the person who has already been through this. The person who already knows what it is to be betrayed by someone they trusted completely. You are not broken because you trusted someone who did not deserve it. You are not naive. You are not weak. You are not responsible for what they chose to do with the access you gave them. What you gave them was a gift. It was not your fault that they treated it as a weapon. The work now is not to close yourself off. The work is to learn the difference, slowly, carefully, with grace toward yourself, between people who are safe to open to and people who are not. That discernment is built over time. It cannot be rushed, and it will require you to extend trust again even when trust is the last thing you want to extend. Do it anyway. Not recklessly. Not blindly. But do not let one person's betrayal sentence you to a life behind walls. That would mean they won twice. They already lost. Do not let them take anything else from you. The last thing I want to say is about God. I am not someone who believes that everything happens for a reason in a simple or tidy way. I do not believe that the pain of betrayal is something God designed for your character development. That framing has always felt to me like it minimizes real suffering. But I do believe in a God who sees, who was in that room when she smiled at me, who heard every word of that toast, who knew what was on her phone at 2:17 in the morning while I was sleeping. I believe in a God who is not absent from our suffering, who does not look away from what is done to us, and who does not leave the arc of things to chance. I do not know everything about how that works. I do not have a theology degree, and I am not going to pretend I have answers to questions that are much larger than me. What I have is a testimony. A year after the worst morning of my marriage, I have a husband who chose me. A home that is genuinely peaceful. A life that is mine in ways it never quite was when I was pouring so much of it into someone who was not who I thought she was. And she has a life that looks, by every account, like the harvest of the seeds she planted. I did not engineer that. I just kept moving forward, and God, who had been watching every single moment, handled the rest. If this story reached you today, I want to ask you to do one thing. Think of one person in your life who might need to hear it. Someone who is in the middle of a betrayal right now and cannot see past the pain to the other side. Someone who is questioning whether they will ever trust again. Someone who is sitting in the ashes of something they thought was permanent and wondering how to begin. Send this to them. You do not need a long message. You do not need an explanation. Just send it and let them know they are not alone. And if you are that person, if you are the one in the ashes right now, leave me a comment. Tell me where you are. I see every one of them. You are not alone in this, and this story is not over, not even close.